Well, hello to the mad modders. I've been asked what do I do and where do I do it, so here's a quick look around. This is my warehouse from which we sell welding equipment. Coming this December, I've been in the game for 40 years and it's getting to be a little bit too much, so I think at that time I'll give it away and retire. Coming up to 68 at the same time. It's quite an extensive warehouse. I've got 649 square metres on the floor, and 40 years is a long time to build it to put together. I'm a little bit on the tired side. Anyway, we'll go down the back and have a look at some machines now. Over the years I have really collected just too much stuff in inverted commas, so it's overflowed out into the general storage in the warehouse. Up the top there's a couple of Lister D petrol engines, 2 horsepower. That'll be made into shunting locomotives, 5-inch gauge riding car, and on that pallet 2 Lister R diesel engines. And sitting in that crate centre field now is an absolutely enormous dividing head that I bought on a whim. Never used it, too big I think to go on my mill, but one day I'll get it down and do a video of what's inside the box. It's a very, very complex gear dividing head, and I think it's worth a video on its own. Okay, we'll go to the other side of the shed now. Here's the best workshop radial arm drill I've come across. Picked it up for a good price. It's 1 metre or 40-inch arm, 4 Morse taper, 9-inch column. Italian-made machine, 3 feeds. It doesn't like feeding at a high rate. It's got a bit of a grumble in the bearings there. Beautiful piece of equipment to use. Not too large that it takes up a lot of space. And I use it for drilling boiler tube plates and on end fittings. You just can't get them in the mill. There is one of my Cincinnati number 2 twirling cutter grinders, not yet restored, but I've got a heap of gear for it that I'll show you in a sec. Move around a bit more. Here's another look at the other side of the old Cincinnati. We'll swing around to my larger power hacksaw, 16-inch blade Parkinson. Very sturdy industrial machine that's got a lot of life left in it. And a cheap and nasty vertical bandsaw. I think I'll be replacing that when I can find something better. This bay is where I keep my welding equipment. My MIG welder's currently out on loan to Dallas, but I don't do a lot of welding nowadays. A couple of inverter welders, under the floor a bit of gas gear. And around here, the first good operational grinder that I'll show you. This is a really small version Z25 up to 1-inch capacity drill grinder. You can also grind form relief cutters on it, but it's a little bit limited in what it will do. It's meant mainly for drills and subland drills. It needs a bit of work to get it up together. I think the main problem with it is the chuck is not repeating well. I've already cleaned out the chuck on the form relief grinder, I'll show you soon, so this is up for a little bit of a rebirthing. They go about it quite well, these machines, give a reasonable finish, but it's limited in being designed particularly for 118 degree drills. That's what it's aimed at, but worth the money I paid for it. Next we'll go inside the workrooms. Here we are inside the first of the workshops. This is an Australian-made wall-down drill press, and yes, they are worth the extra money. The table doesn't deflect when you try and drill locomotive frames. It's just an all-round good piece of kit. Love it to death, glad I've got one. Hiding in amongst the rubble is a big 8-inch bench grinder with the grill grinding attachment hanging off the end of it. I've put videos up on YouTube about that. Good piece of kit also. There we have a Jns Surface Grinder. Needs a clean and a resto. I got that for a song, but it's a really good machine. My engine crane, I've done a video on that on YouTube. I took 900 mils off both the feet, and it made it really nimble, pushing around in between machines and being a decent workshop crane, so now it's quite useful. As per an English model engineer, I put most of my bench grinders, linear and disc sander on a table on casters. So anytime I'm fettling and creating a lot of dust, I just push it out through the doors and do it in the back of the warehouse, and that saves all my major machine tools getting covered in crap. right in the corner. Little Clarkson number 2 tool and cutter grinder. I've done a lot of videos with that. Very versatile machine, a little bit limited in table space, and without that real estate you can't swing big tools or do big jobs. But I'm developing a lot of what I think is unusual equipment for it, like a sub table, and I'm using a milling table stop as a grinding stop. So if you go to my YouTube channel, In My Shed with BC, I've done probably 8 or 9 videos using that machine, and it's quite interesting. That's a Servian tool and cutter grinder or an Astra, all depends who you buy it from. And sitting on top of it is a Royal Oak form relief grinding attachment, and I've done videos on that machine. It's good for countersinks, taps, drills, any form relief cutter, and you can also vary the amount of axial and radial relief. It has a ratioing arm. Good video of that on YouTube. It's a little bench grinder I use for gulleting rotor broach cutters, and it's sitting on top of my rotary phase converter. Here's a Rongfu 450 tool and cutter grinder that I use mainly for annular cutters or rotor broach cutters. That is a most versatile machine, but built light and built cheap, which is a bit of a downfall for it. But I use that on a regular basis. Big TOS tool and cutter grinder with table stops, vernier angle table, a really beautiful machine. I just haven't had the hours to restore it and get it going. I bought that purely because it had the Royal Oak relief grinding attachment on top of it, and it's been a godsend. That was well worth the money. Okay, we'll move up a few metres and I'll show you what's sitting on the bench here. Like most small workshops, my bench is covered with everything I did last week, the week before, and the 3 months prior to that. I don't think I've seen many workshops with a tidy bench until yesterday. I did a video of inside Graham's shed at Graham's Engineering. Man, that place is spotless. You could eat off the bloody floor. He does a good job. That's been the focus of my attention for some time. That's a Bagnall marine style boiler for a Sweet Williams 7¼ inch locomotive. It's finally passed its hydro test and very, very close to fitting to the frames when I get time. Under all the rags of the frames, I have most of the undercarriage done, and today I'll be working on the axle box horns with my shaper, cutting a few bits. This is part of the library of tool and cutter grinder accessories I have. And that's how you buy them, auction lots or gifts from friends. You pick out what's good and what isn't, build the rest up. It's a lifelong obsession, but eventually you finish up with parts that are useful. And in the background there, some tube and tube plates for boilers. I'm now selling boiler materials and are getting ready to publish a couple of boiler designs we're having approved by the AMBSC Boiler Committee. It'll be a retirement project, something to earn me a few beer dollars. Now we move over into the next room. My first turret mill. It's the heavier of the two models with the 40 International Arbor, which I appreciate. It gives it a bit of grunt. And a real winner on the back. That came off a Beaver mill. It's a slotting attachment or vertical shaper. Although it's very old and it never worked in its life before I got it, I used that to put keyways into locomotive wheels or squaring out slots for high-speed steel cutting tools. Good combination. It only takes about 5 minutes to swing the arm around and get the rear head into operation on the table. And if you like, in a later video I'll show some of the jigs I've made for slotting wheels, etc., and for drilling crank pin holes. There's my big shaper, CMZ L450, 16-inch stroke, and it is dwarfed by Graham's Strigon that I saw yesterday. He's got a 1969 Strigon, which is a monster with rapid feeds on the table. And all the bells and whistles, lovely item. But this will do me. It's what I can afford, and it's what I have. In the background, Kearns Type S horizontal borer. It's one of the smaller borers. It doesn't have a pecking quill. You have to do all the moving with the table. But the table has 3-speed power feeds. Had a bit of trouble with it a few years ago. The worm wheel on the tower shaft decided to fail due to my ineptitude in not keeping oil up, and some previous idiot had pulled one of the dowel pins out of the upper bearing housing, allowing the shaft to come out of engagement. It was a couple of years to source bearings, which are all obsolete now of course, and get a gear made up by Ford McKenna Engineering at Euroa, Victoria, but it's once again running. Very versatile machine, a small borer. I use it specifically on the back ends of boilers because the length of the boiler doesn't take it outside of the work envelope. So pretty good table, 450 square, and it rotates as well. Good machine. Now I'll move inside the workroom and show you a bit more of my kit. It's a handy little fellow, Milbro 5-inch hacksaw, 5-inch capacity with a 12-inch blade, and I keep it in here for doing small jobs. Very handy. That can be cutting off a bit of stock while I'm working on the lathe. Speaking of which, swing around to a little Myford, which I haven't got running yet. Bit of a disappointment, those things are not much of a product. Down there is the backsteady for the horizontal borer, and in the box next to it's my 12-inch rotary table. This is the big fella, the queen of the shop, Mazak mate lathe. It'll swing, I think, about 17 inches as it is, and 27 inches if you pull the gap out of it. Very unusual lathe. It's only got about 1 3/4 bore, and I think 76 is the slowest speed, so I don't know what the hell it was made for. It wasn't made for shafts because the bore is small, wasn't made for faceplate work, although the Ford jaw chuck is a faceplate. Still, I got it at the right price and love every minute of it. In the background there is the shelving with clamps and accessories. Here I have a small jack type hydraulic press. Here's a closer look at some of the parts, clamps, loco wheels, jigs, things you accumulate over the years. Boring head over the background, drills and tools. And I think every machine I've bought, I've come up with a machine jack vise, and I just have them everywhere. They are handy. Some are too big to fit on the mill, and that's another view of the milling machine. Okay, that's all for now. I'll post this and you can see where I come from.